Thank you, Wayne. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad to see you. We are, I think the summer went by really, really fast. When we met last, it was May, and now we are full force into August and almost to the end already. So glad to have our third quarterly meeting, and I'm so glad you were able to join us. So Dr. Thompson, I'm going to quit sharing my screen and, excuse me, give you the opportunity to kick it off and get us started.
Thank you, Amanda. So good to see everybody. Welcome back. Welcome to the fall. All of you who are in post-secondary, you're jumping back into it. Those in K-12, you're jumping back into it. Those of us who are in both worlds, playing in both worlds, have never gotten out of it. So it's good to see everybody, and it's good to be here to talk truly, I think, about what we're here to talk about for the good of Kentucky. You know, this pipeline feeding from early childhood through post-secondary education into the workforce, I can't think of anything more important for us to do. I can't think of anything that lends itself to what I consider to be good leadership more than this work. You know, looking at our young people, and some not so young, and looking at exactly what they're going to need to enhance their lives to be successful at the next level. That's truly what we stand for, and I appreciate each of you for taking part in this effort. You know, and this year, this fall, I'll say, and starting, I hope we're able to even push the envelope a little faster and a little farther than we've ever pushed it, simply because there's a need for that, not just necessarily around loss of learning or anything else. There's a need for that because for Kentucky still to move forward in our endeavors to build and keep building the economy, I think we have to recognize that we faced some barriers. And that's what this group is here for, to recognize and identify those and figure out how to get over those. You know about the FAFSA? I know Joe Carroll does well. You know, that slowed us down a little bit, but we're not going to let it stand in our way. Kentucky, we have been able to work with constituencies like you, KDE, KIA, Gear Up, lots of folk to really, for Kentucky to lead in some of this area, even though we and everybody thought we would be far behind. And now, you know, only a select few will be able to fill out in October, and December 1 looks like the deadline. I've been on some folks from DC this week that says, well, they're pretty sure that's going to be the case. But of course, I heard this all summer long and all last spring. So hopefully that will be the case. But the item that I'm really proud of is that I have a new partner in this work. I have someone who I've known for a while in the role he served before, but over the last many months, got to know him a little better. We're going to get to know each other a little better as we go. So I have a new co-lead in this effort. And I'm proud for those who haven't met him. Please feel free to meet him now, but many of you have. But I'm proud to say that we were able to select just a top-notch person for the Commissioner of Education for Kentucky, and obviously the top-notch person for the co-lead of the Ed Continuum. So with that in mind, I'm not going to take up any more time, but I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Robbie Fletcher. And Dr. Fletcher, please talk to us a little bit about what's going on in KDE and K-12.
Well, Dr. Thompson, first and foremost, thank you for that kind introduction. And I look forward to be able to walk alongside you in this work. This would be a great opportunity for me to learn, but also to see our resources here at KDE and how we can push that forward to help remove barriers, as you've talked about. And a lot of times, you know, I've had the opportunity to talk with a lot of people. And if you wouldn't mind to go on to the next slide there, Amanda, thank you. If you know the different opportunities I've had to talk to different folks, the message is pretty simple. One, we want to make sure that we are building relationships. And that's one of the things about this consortium. This continuum is to make sure that we are building relationships with from P through 20, but also too with so many of our people in our communities so that we can work what's best for kids. So in order to have those relationships, you know, it takes a lot of time of just going out and talking with people, But also, too, we want to make sure that those relationships are formed in such a way that we provide more opportunities for all of our students. And again, the three parts of that opportunities is making sure that every child has the opportunity to dream, because sometimes we have to, and especially in our P12, we have to make sure that we give those kids every opportunity to learn about what's their potential and where they can go and what they can do. But again, teaching them and let them know the possibilities and able to dream. But also, too, the opportunity to struggle. We want students to grow. And if you're going to grow, there has to be a little bit of struggle in that, but to be there to support them in every way. And then the last part of that, of course, is the opportunity to succeed. And I think that's the big part of this relationship, is to make sure that all of our kids have that opportunity to succeed once they leave our buildings, and once they go into post-secondary, once they go into their career and farther along. We want to make sure that we are a part of that, removing barriers, so that our students have those opportunities. So along the lines of building relationships, you'll see a slide here that has some things that I'm sorry, go back, please, Amanda. There are some pictures there. That's okay. There's some pictures there of the new commissioner out meeting people, talking with people. Had the blessing of going to Bourbon Central Elementary back in June before my first day to be a part of a Reads to Succeed group, a summer reading program. You see me there reading with Luna, who is a phenomenal young lady who acted out a lot of the book for me as we went through, and for the people in the stands. So that was a great, I've used that picture because that's my favorite picture, other than the gray hair, which I didn't realize I had so much. That's one of my favorite pictures so far. But also, too, you see sitting there with students. And that's what the job is about. Anytime that I have the opportunity to sit with students, I'm very thankful for that. And also work alongside Representative Tipton, who was there to read books also with kids. That was a great opportunity, again, to build relationships with legislators. On the other is two receptions. You have a reception there that we had here in Frankfort that had people from all different parts of the Commonwealth and different roles, everything from K groups to KDE to the cabinet. Also, the Lieutenant Governor was there. Very thankful for that. But also, to Team KDE, we had a reception here back in July, and it was a great opportunity to get a meet and greet all the people here as part of Team KDE at our department. I've been to a lot of different things building relationships. I've been the keynote speaker for KASA, their institute, KASS, KSBA, the Kentucky Leadership Institute out in Bowling Green. I've met with several legislators individually. I've been to Shelby County, Bourbon County, and Rockcastle County. I'm going to be making a trip to Murray, Livingston, and Union and Christian County at the end of the month. But also, too, I've talked with the KCTCS president, Ryan Quarles. Dr. Quarles was great to have the opportunity to talk with. Morehead State's president, Jay Morgan, and I will also be meeting with Murray State's president, Jackson, here in the days to come. So all of those are about building relationships and how we can remove barriers to help kids. So if we move on to the next slide, please. As far as enough about me, a few things about some things that are happening here. We're doing a statewide chronic absenteeism campaign, and I love what our communications group they've got out of their comfort zone a little bit. And what they've done is they put together some ESSER funds and did a campaign on talking about attendance matters. And more importantly, when kids aren't in the classroom, we miss them. Again, that thought of relationship. Making sure that kids and parents and our community know that, when a student's not in our classroom, they miss out on a lot of things, everything from friendships to projects to learning, especially learning, of course. But we want them to know that we miss them. So you'll see a lot of billboards that'll have empty seats just to say, hey, you weren't here today. We've missed you. So that chronic absenteeism campaign also includes a web page here on our website that gives some different tools that would help to help combat the chronic absenteeism that's going on. I'm also very thankful for a partnership that we're working on with the cabinet. We'll be working with Miss Scotty Ellis, who is with the Cabinet for Economic Development. She is their executive advisor. We're going to put together another campaign, which is a part of the work here, dealing with teacher recruitment and retainment, and how we can put that together to advertise and say, how are we recruiting teachers? How can we work with the cabinet to have that opportunity? And also, too, and Director again here, what Jennifer would tell you first and foremost, it was a stretch for us to work in marketing and advertising. So what can we learn from other departments so that we can better serve our students and the people that we are here? Amanda, someone has their hand up. So I'll stop there. And if there's a question, I'll try to answer.
Yeah, please go ahead.
No question? Okay. All right, Amanda, next slide, please. So again, as far as that partnership with the Cabinet for Economic Development, very thankful that we'll have the opportunity to learn, but also too, how can we reach groups? You want to reach an audience in a method that is best for them. So how can we do a better job of reaching different folks to get our message out about what's going on great in public schools, recruiting and retaining not only teachers, but also to our classified folks. So that's when you talk about removing barriers, a big barrier is chronic absenteeism, but also the opportunity to work with others to grow professionally here. The next thing is, if you could do a pie chart of my time, the largest piece of pie would have to deal with accountability and assessment. We've recently had had a summer convening on July 29th, and we've come up with another version of the accountability model, and it's more about having a study phase. Here's a framework of what's going on when we talk about accreditation models, through course assessments, even vibrant learning experiences or collaboration. How do we wrap that into an accountability model that every single person in the Commonwealth feels good about? I know we can't make everybody happy, but still, how do we know that the accountability system we have is best for kids? So we're at version 4.0, which really looks a lot like a framework combined with a lot of study questions that's going to be sent out to all school districts. And of course, we're asking school districts to get input from their communities, but there's actually going to be 36 districts that are going to be concentrating a lot of the work here. We'll allow other districts to also work through their co-ops, but we're sending out all these questions to 18 of our local laboratories of learning, but also 18 other districts that haven't been a part of that work to get input back into the questions that we've asked. And I really appreciate Jennifer Stafford and also Rhonda Sims and others here, and Karen Dodd and others that have worked so diligently on this work, and especially our Kentucky United We Learn Council. Our group there has had a lot of input. As a matter of fact, in our convening, we had 5 legislators there. You see Representative Truitt. We also had Representative Tipton, Representative Bojanowski. We had Senator Deneen and also Senator Wise that were part of that work, and to listen to what was going on in the conversation. So again, building relationships to remove barriers to give kids opportunities. So we're into that study phase, and we're waiting for more information to come back from there. Next slide, please, Amanda. And just to give you an idea of the path or the launch, if you will, we've developed prototypes. We've skipped that. We've already been through that first part. We're up to version 4.0, and now we're into that phase of having our legislators aware. And that was a big step yesterday. I was at IJCE yesterday to let our legislators see where we are and have some questions about where we are in this development of a new accountability system. And now we're moving into that study phase. So you can see between now and fall 2025 and summer 2026, we have a very steep trajectory to get through. But you can see what we're looking at as far as trying our best to get an accountability system. And as you can see, our moonshot is to build a prosperous Kentucky. We will launch an accountability system that is meaningful and useful to all our learners. So very exciting work. Again, it should take a large part of my pie for right now, if you will, for our time, and very thankful for that, and very thankful for all the input we've had across the Commonwealth. So I'll turn it back over to Amanda.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Is there any questions for Commissioner Fletcher or President Thompson before we get started into our agenda?
Please, any questions at all? Welcome those.
Commissioner Fletcher, I think you said this, we're in the study phase now of this, I guess. Do you have a reasonable far out timeline for us to think about with this work?
Yeah, if you'll pull up the slide there again, Amanda, if you don't mind, you're looking at hopefully having a landing, you will, for our moonshot in the summer of 26. But now, of course, as you know, if we're going to do any type of funding asks of the government, we're going to have something together by spring 2025, but then hopefully have this new reimagined accountability system by the summer of 2026.
Yeah, you're actually answering the real question I was asking. I saw the summer of 26, but I didn't know if we were thinking about if we're going to have any ask of the General Assembly coming in that next budget year, or whether we were looking at the previous budget year for 26. I'm assuming, assuming you just answered. So yeah, that's what I was really asking, because if you have the landing summer 26, then the implementation you're thinking of will be somewhere in the next year.
Again, this study phase is going on right now. As far as an implementation, when we go statewide, we're even looking at maybe implementing this in phases. Again, depending on what each part looks like. To give you an example, if our districts and our Kentucky United We Learn Council looks at vibrant learning experiences, how many districts they have their portrait of graduate work completed and they're ready for those type of experiences? So if we go this route, the first phase could say, do you offer vibrant learning? And these are the type of activities, almost like the check boxes for post-secondary readiness. Mm-hmm. And then maybe after 2 years, let's look at the quality of what you're offering as vibrant learning. So again, the first phase we're shooting for is summer 2026, but you're absolutely correct, Dr. Thompson. We're going to have to engage the General Assembly and possibly look at some budget requests in the session in January 2025.
So just to let the rest of the members know, the commissioner and I are talking about, as well know, post-secondary, we have a graduate profile, P12, Portrait of a Learner. I think it is important for us to say that one of our connections, if you will, that we're looking forward to down the road is to make sure that we are connecting these as close as possible as a bridge point, and knowing that seamless element helps our students to really build off of the portrait of a graduate into the graduate profile that employers say that they want, then into the workforce. So a part of this discussion, and obviously the commissioner and I will have a lot more conversations around this, may lend itself to the way that CPE thinks about its budget in addition, right? As we try to match these items up for our students.
I will point out something that's in the chat, and I agree with Penny Christian, who is our president, our Cool Council, our chair, if you will. She is talking about our VLE, our Vibrant Learning Group, really needs to identify effective vibrant learning before we can share it. So again, this is what vibrant learning is. And then how do we get to that point to where we make sure that everybody's implementing those same things? But along the same lines with Dr. Thompson, the partnership between the two of us and the people on here is so important, because how does this impact teacher preparation programs? How does this impact our students just as they leave? And again, that partnership where you have a graduate profile and the portrait of a learner, I think, is a great step forward as we talk about these type of topics.
Yeah, so thank you so much, both of you, because that is just a great segue before going over the agenda and what we've done this summer. I will tell you, the Lieutenant Governor is not able to be here today, so she sent specific things that she wanted you all to know, that she has been invited to speak about the Kentucky Student Mental Health Initiative at the Science Summit at the 79th Annual United Nations meeting in New York next month. So she's really excited to be able to represent Kentucky in that work, and she was very excited. She was invited because this effort was entirely student-led, and the UN and sponsors felt this effort could be replicated in cities and countries around the world. So she wanted to make sure you all knew that, especially with your support of student voice and action in Kentucky. And just before we share the agenda to move forward with the day, the conversation really around this accountability system and the partnership, Commissioner, that you spoke of, and President Thompson, is exactly what's going on. And so we have the work groups have been working all summer, meeting monthly or almost monthly, specifically around teacher recruitment and retention. A lot of that's gone into leadership development and support of principals, because they have lots of jobs. retaining staff is a big part of that, and recruitment of staff, and creating a culture where folks want to stay, and a vibrant learning environment for our students. So that's one of the things that we have. And also specifically the alignment of the profile of a learner and how that aligns with our graduate profile. And so we are so grateful for Sarah Snipes and Crystal Rowland, who is partnering with Melissa Bell and Jana Weiss, who's doing that work of our profile of a graduate to really include each other in the work. And then their goal, President Thompson, to your point, is to really come out with a product of a crosswalk to show that continuum, no pun intended, from early childhood all the way through post-secondary for the workforce, to see how these skills and dispositions and competencies are being built over time throughout the entire education journey, from early age all the way into their post-secondary to come into their career field, showing that they exhibit more than just knowledge and skills, but also those competencies that will help them make to be successful. So those are just two of the ones. Of course, advising has been another piece of that, and affordability. So we've had 4 groups working. We are not going to give you specific updates on those today, just because we are tight on time. There's always so much to talk about. But in November, when we come together and we have a little bit of longer time to meet and it's face to face, we're going to be able to share the progress being made, your feedback, is it moving in the right direction, and some things that these groups have been able to do. Dr. Fletcher, I saw your hand raised. I don't want to be sure.
No, I was just doing a reaction of
Oh, okay.
So just
Okay.
again, praise. There's a little praise there. So
Oh, great.
that's
Well,
what that was for.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So for today, just so you can kind of see what is on our agenda, is that we are going to respond. We're responding to you based on our meeting in November. And I know that seems like forever ago. We really talked about the need for progress. Are we making progress as a state? And that doesn't mean that the continuum has that direct correlation of progress and we're making the change, but are we putting our efforts and our collaboration around the right things? And are we seeing improvement in these areas, or are we still seeing a struggle, and why, and how should that drive our work? And so our data team that meets monthly has gotten together, and they are going to show us a draft one, or a dashboard that we could possibly use with a few data points to see, is this the direction you would like to go as we move forward and meet? And so I won't steal their thunder. We're going to do that. The other thing was that with the continuum, we spent the first couple of years, almost 3, really digging into the issues and the potholes, as Dr. Thompson would say, with dual credit. And so we have taken a lot of those recommendations to heart. There is a advisory that comes together that's a collaborative group that's higher ed and K-12 and KIA, and everybody coming to the table going, what do we need to do? And we're going to talk a little bit about that today and show you some outcome data, and also some feedback from the community of practice that we had a couple of months ago that was just very rich in conversation and has really driven some great change and additional collaboration. And then we're going to wrap up with a discussion about AI. Several of you have reached out and said, where are you guys with this? What are we doing? What's the impact on students in K-12 and higher ed? What does this look like ethically? How do we handle this? How do we embrace it? And I know there are a lot of different efforts going on. So we do have a guest that is supposed to come today to lead that conversation. So I'm going to stop sharing and actually turn it over to our data team to present what they have. And so I think Beth is actually here today representing Matt and KY Stats, and we are so appreciative of Beth joining us. Dr. Kelly is obviously very well known and is a great partner. So Beth, we welcome you to the Continuum. I know, I think you said Matt might be enjoying Ireland a little bit. I don't know why he would choose Ireland over our CEC meeting, but we'll take it. And I'll let you all share the example that we have to see if we're on the right track.
Sure. Well, thanks, Amanda. Thanks for having me. So the data team and I am just standing in for Matt. So I'm, talking about what he's told me, but the data team came together and decided on some data points that you might want to see to maybe have something more timely to discuss. And so what we did is take some data from KDE and CPE and also publicly available FAFSA data from studentaid.gov and tried to make a dashboard that could be updated monthly. And so we did password protect this so that if the data say up from KDE are preliminary, then that's not getting out there. And so just especially as we decide what's going to go on here. So Dee Dee's going to talk through the KDE data, and I believe Travis is going to talk through the CPE data, or maybe with Alicia too. And I can pepper in information wherever we need. So go right ahead, Dee Dee, I guess.
All right. Can you hear me okay? Great. So Beth, you can pepper in as much as you'd like, but my name is Dee Dee Connor. I'm Chief Data Officer for the Kentucky Department of Education, and we worked along with the rest of the CEC data team and came up with a few metrics that we felt like we were hearing from you that you'd like to see more frequent data. You want to see data that is more timely, so that you can see if your initiatives are making a difference, and you want to see where that's impactful. And as most of you know, we tend to provide data once a year. We're very conscious of the fact that it's district data, it's not state KDE data. We typically give districts time to look at their data, verify data before we start sharing it out. So that's why you have the password protection on here. And that's why I'm going to start off with a disclaimer in the fact that when you look at current year data, it is current year data. It's going to change. If you see this first chart, which is the high school advanced coursework preliminary enrollment counts, you're going to see right now that it looks like dual credit's going down. I wouldn't put too much into that yet, because all those dual credit courses might not be set up in every school. You know, if I was to click here and if I was going down, and I did cheat and go ahead and look ahead. I look at Boone, their numbers are going up. That's what we want to see, right? So anyway, that is something we can see this data by district. It's only at school and state and district level. And going back to the state data, we can just choose the state option for state totals, and we can see that. So right now we can see here that, APs and IB, which is very few, you can kind of see there's only 188 CAI or Cambridge Advanced International students. And when you look at International Binocular Art, we've got a little over 1,000 students. There's not a lot of students in those, and they've stayed very flat. Dual credit, you see a lot more students involved in dual credit, and you see those numbers gradually going up. But what you're seeing here, you can see in our school report card. It's this new stuff. This stuff, it's happening current year, which is what you're able to see in this dashboard that you're not able to see in the school report card. So as you've made changes, as districts have made changes, and you want to look at that data to see if it's being impactful, it is possible to go. This dashboard will be updated monthly, so you'll get information. And you can see down here this early post-secondary. That's a combination of all these. It's really just saying that, okay, this is the total number of students, because we know a student might be taking AP classes and dual credit classes. So they're counted as two different, as two, and two here or more, where they will only be counted as one in the post-secondary. Another area we felt that we heard from you all, and I'm not an expert in this, but I kind of go, I know I've got some Kia folks out here that'll chime right in if I say anything wrong. Kentucky Stats pulled information from the Federal Student Aid website. This is FAFSA information. And I know there's been a lot of interest in FAFSA, especially over the last year with the changes, and it sounds like there's going to be more changes for this year and a little bit delayed again. So we have seen numbers go down. And this is just nothing that you can't find on the Federal Student Aid website. You can find a lot more granularity on that Student Aid site. You can go all the way down to a school level and see that. But this provides you a real quick dashboard to see what the numbers are in the most recent pulls. And that data does tend to update, I think, every 2 weeks. And then we also have the Educator Placement Service. And again, this is available on a KDE website, the Kentucky Educator Placement Service, that shows you what the number of vacancies are per type. Here we start with elementary and high school, Those are directly from the KDE, Kentucky Educator Placement Service site. Again, the more granular data is available, but it does give you a point in time. This data, I think, is updated on maybe even a nightly basis, and you can see that by district also. The data is really good as far as postings because the schools are required to post these. But as you know, it's very busy at the schools, especially right now. So they may have not closed out some of these postings that have been filled. So you have a little bit of cautionary note on that also. So that kind of gives you some information on the top three items that we're going over today. And then I'm glad to take questions, or I would be glad to turn it over to Travis and Alicia, and then we can take questions afterwards.
Dee Dee, I just want to point out that several of our campuses are starting a little bit later than they did last year. So it's not really apples to apples on dual credit. So it probably is going to be more like apples to apples a week from now, where then my guess is you're going to see that line actually go up more, would be my guess.
And that's a very good point, and does probably explain some of the differences. This information is pulled directly from Infinite Campus, so we are reliant on the course being set up in Infinite Campus first. And if they've waited to set those courses up till closer to the actual time the school starts, that could be a big factor there. All right, Travis and Alicia, you want to take it from here?
Thank you, Dee Dee.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
How do you capture, does this also capture the students who are taking dual credit actually physically on the college campuses?
Yes.
Okay.
As long as it's been set up correctly in Infinite Campus, we're pulling all dual credit coursework, regardless of whether it's on site or at the school.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Looks like you have a couple other hands raised too. I think Eddie
Yes,
and then
thank
Dallas.
you. Thank you, Amanda. Dee Dee, is there a way to see if if this is if these lines for dual credit and AP classes are trending up with more engagement? I know that was one of the goals, was to engage more students in the AP classes and the dual credit by getting out information and the importance of those.
I would feel more comfortable with the numbers we see in September than the numbers we see in early August, to be real honest with you. I just think there's still some setup being done with courses and everything, and students juggling in and out of different courses. It just happens at the beginning of every year. But you do see 35,088 students in AP last year and already 35,599. So it's that's a fraction up. But when we look at the numbers in September, I think we'll have better numbers because we'll have more complete schedules. We have some schools that haven't even started yet.
Okay, so this is just from July 23 to July 24.
Right.
Is there
Yes.
more longitudinal data that goes back to when we first, as the committee, started focusing on this, so we can see if there's an overall trend up?
Yes.
And also, is there
add additional data? We've got in our school report card, we do report on this every single year. So we've got publicly available data we could pull in and make it a more lengthy time frame. That's kind of feedback's great feedback for us on what you'd like to see, because we're really Kentucky Stats is really building this for this committee. So we would like to make sure it serves your needs.
And Travis, we may be answering some of those questions in a second. Might we not?
Yeah, and just to keep in mind, this is really the first iteration. So the hard work was really building the framework and kind of the data set, the proper data set. But we always intended to kind of get all the feedback we could so that we could make sure that we're not only displaying the correct data, but displaying it in the correct way that that provides the best possible information for your all's work. So absolutely appreciate the feedback.
Thank you.
Dallas, I think you were next, and then the commissioner.
Sure, thank you. Dee Dee, I'm kind of all things military associated, and one of the things we're interested in is with the Kentucky Educator Placement. Can you go down to something as granular as CTE instructors available or positions that are open?
I believe you can. I'm not an expert on that, but when you get into the KEP site, and if you go onto Katie's website or just search for the Kentucky Educator Placement Service, you will get the information, and it goes down to a lot more granularity. And it is the only cautionary statement they always make on that is it's only as good as the districts are keeping it up to date.
Right.
And everybody's super busy, I know, out there, but I think we get a lot of really good placements. There's I think it's a statute that says they have to place their vacancies on that site. It's a struggle sometimes to get them closed off when they get filled.
Sure. Thank you.
Commissioner, I think you're next, and then Representative Tipton's after you.
Yeah, going back to the question about KEP site, you can actually look at, for example, the subjects that are posted for, like, if you wanted to see what JROTC, or if you wanted to see emotional behavior disorders, EBD, or speech teachers, or ESL. You can get pretty granular on the KEP site. But again, the key there is a lot of times districts get busy and they don't always close out like you post it, but then you may not close it out. So sometimes those postings may still be on the site, but may not have, whereas it may not be the most up to date because districts may not have closed it, if you will. So that's a great point, Dee Dee. Thank you for that. The other thing, the question I had is, when I see data like this, these are raw numbers. And if you look at that, which is very important, but I was thinking about along the lines of would it be possible to look at percentages of our high school seniors, percentages of our high school juniors, because then, if you have a decrease in the senior class or the junior class, or, it could go all the way from, freshmen to seniors altogether, what percentage of our students are taking those dual credit courses? And is that increasing? Because, we may have a year where we have a very small senior class across the state. I know it sounds odd, but it's possible. So, for me, I would look at a lot at percentages also too of our students that are taking these type of courses.
So I have a question for you, because that one comes up a lot. And when you think about it, do we think about it from perspective any high school student, or do we think about it at a grade range? Because there's different ideas on how best to show that data, because some schools may only offer it to juniors and seniors. Others may have some, more of the freshman, sophomore. It does vary across the state from what we can tell.
Well, I think it would probably be best to look at juniors and seniors, because of those are when the scholarships are available for those students a lot of times in their junior and senior years. And then there may be some available for the sophomores. I have to go back and look at that. But with that being said, I believe there is anyway, but maybe even where you can do drop-down boxes, the percentage of seniors, the percentage of juniors, the percentage of sophomores, or what percentage are taking CTE type dual credit versus other credit types of credit. So again, just I love the data here, but for me, it'd make a little more sense to see the growth as far as percentage of students.
Okay.
We do have, where we're tracking over the years, the percent of credit hours generated increase, as well as the percent of head count generated. Travis, how do we have that broken down?
Well, we actually, on our main data portal website, we do have that as percent change over time.
Okay.
And so, but, then again, with this, I think we were trying to kind of balance, and I completely agree with you, Commissioner, that, the percentages or proportions make more sense than raw numbers when it comes, especially from a longitudinal perspective, to look at things over time and to see actual changes. And, we can definitely incorporate a lot of that, into this. And we went back and forth between how do we make it accessible and be easily used without kind of just throwing every data point, because in Kentucky we're kind of blessed and cursed. We have an amazing rich data system, and we have great partnerships with KY Stats, but that also means that there's so much that we could put on a dashboard or website like this that it could almost be too rich or too much on there to where it really kind of distracts from the usefulness of it. But absolutely great feedback.
Two points I want to make. I think Joe Carroll made one point, that there are scholarships available for CTE in the freshman year, even dual credit. But for us in higher education, we look at specifically heavily what's going on in junior and senior years, simply because we have to prepare ourselves to be either able to teach the course or be able to work with K-12 to do it inside of the K-12 classroom. A part of what we're running into, I'll just throw this in, and this is the conversation, Commissioner, you and I talked about, and I've even talked about it with Representative Tipton. Down the road, I'd like to see us create, really maybe talk with EPSB, create an opportunity for us to have a master's degree, well, actually several, that would heavily focus on helping us heavily focus on content, so we can get more of our teachers skilled up to teach dual credit. And the rate we're going to have to do that sooner rather than later. Number two is to focus heavily on some content areas for elementary and above in areas like math and science and so on, that would really be able then to down the road even feed that population growth of dual credit, as well as really the needs of putting more of these folks inside of as teachers. So a lot of this information leads us to good policy discussions, just to let this group know.
Representative Tipton, I think you had your hand raised.
Thank you, Amanda. And I apologize for being late. Amanda, you won't believe this, but I had another meeting I was in. But I think we all understand that. So anyway, I'm getting here late, but I guess first thing I saw when I turned on the screen was looking at the number of dual credit courses from July 23 to August 24. So my initial question is, as much as we're promoting dual credit, as much as we talked about CTE in committee this morning, why are the number of dual credit courses down in the last year?
I don't think we think they are at this point in time. I think we think this is a little early. That's the cautionary statement I made initially, that you probably weren't there for that. Sure. Early, because we pulled this the 1st of August. School hadn't even started. So it's really early to be saying this is what, I switched over to Boone, and Boone's showing a growth in, AP and in dual credit. I think you're just seeing the fact that not all courses are in the schedules in Infinite Campus yet. And I would expect that when we see this in September, you're going to see a better reflection of an upward trend that you're hoping to see. Yeah, I'm hopeful anyway, because we've seen that trend going, and there's no reason to think it's not going to go up, but we just don't have the data available. And that's one of the things in the past. We've not provided this preliminary data because it can tell a story that's not complete. And
I appreciate that explanation.
Demonstrating that,
right? When I first looked at the graph, it just stuck in my head.
I know. I was like, can I just choose a district that goes up?
Well, Representative Tipton, another thing you probably missed was, our school districts hadn't started yet, and there's post-secondary education lagging behind. So we're running about, this is not apples to apples, really, when you think about it.
Probably mid-October numbers would be better numbers.
Yeah, well, without a doubt. So you're probably a week and a half lag here at the minimum. So in that regard, so yeah, my guess is they all go up significantly.
I'm sorry, Amanda, go ahead.
No, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
You'll see another impactful change probably in February, because you'll have some students that will only take the one semester dual credit course. They might not be in one for the first semester, but they take one the second semester, and those won't be reflected yet.
Okay, could somebody pull back down to the CAPS portion of the slide? Yesterday in the Interim Joint Committee on Education, we had some testimony. Had Eddie Campbell was on there, had a couple of educators from Spencer County, and one of the comments was made about making the application process easier. Of course, Amanda, you probably remember, I know President Thompson does, back before the 23 session, the work on House Bill 319.
Yes.
Commissioner Glass was heavily involved in that work. And we put some language in there to direct KDE to try to improve that session. Now, I understand there was requests for funding that wasn't provided. I tried, but it wasn't provided. So I guess my question for KDE is, where are we now with that system? And is there still work that can be done, that needs to be done to improve that system?
I'm not an expert on that system, but I've asked a lot of questions, Amanda and I both, about the system. But when we were trying to see if this data should be on this dashboard. And the cautionary tales that I mostly hear is the fact that they're not always closed out. When we have open vacancies that get posted and they don't always get closed out. So that it may be inflating the numbers because some of these positions have either been filled or the district has found another way to divide up the students so that there isn't a vacancy. So it is partially that issue. I don't know that the system's broken in any way. It's just that, with the data itself is somewhat questionable.
Now, one of the questions that come up in our conversation 423 was, one of the issues was teachers may apply in multiple districts. Of course, they're requiring background checks. Has there been a process put in place where they can just have one background check done that can be used for all districts without them having to go through multiple background checks? We talked a lot about how to make this system more user friendly, and I know you're just coming on, Commissioner Fletcher. But I'd like some input on how can we do this to make this simpler for the teacher applicants and for the school districts. And be interested to hear any suggestions KDE may have coming forward.
Well, if I may, Dr. Ellis, a couple of things. We met with the Office of Educational Licensure and Effectiveness here recently, and we were talking about how to get better data. And unfortunately, that's going to have to probably be with a survey to districts. And we were talking about doing that survey twice a year, possibly the mid-September, to just ask districts, come up with a simple survey of how many openings do you have? What are the areas? What's the grade level? Is it a specific subject area? That way, when you ask me as a legislator, Robbie, what are we having struggles with? I can say, well, here's the data as of September 15th. And then that way, as far as it's not reliant on whether or not they close out, and then doing that type of survey or type of report twice a year. Do it once, and because by September, if you haven't filled that position, then it's going to be a struggle for you to finish altogether. So that's going to be real data. Taking that data in July is not going to mean a thing because there are still positions that are going to need to be filled. So possibly doing that in mid-September, but also in around February, maybe the 1st of February, end of January. That way we can have consistent data moving forward. Now, I do believe that KEPS has a lot of, the way KEPS works now is basically you go in, you do a search for a particular opening, and it'll give you any opening throughout the state as a teacher, as a prospective teacher, that this is what I want. But it's still up to you to go to that district's website and get the application. So I think what would be very beneficial to us, and of course we need some funding for this, is to have one application system. Then you could also include in that what other aspects of that one application system. If I'm a superintendent or a principal in Callaway County, and I'm looking for a math teacher and then I want to look at the applicants within 50 miles, or maybe I want to look statewide. And then I can see every single applicant for math teachers or for an elementary or gifted and talented or any subject that you want, that I can just call and recruit. But also, two things that we could possibly implement into that is once you do your background check with a specific district, it could be uploaded to that system and you won't have to do it again and again. So I think the KEPS system served its purpose. It was probably a state-of-the-art system back in the late 2000s, 2005, 2006. But now we need something where you can go in and do one application. And as a teacher, a prospective teacher, I want to send it within 50 miles of here, or I want to send it statewide and have that available. And then what other things could we add to it? Like you just brought up of, can we have maybe they did their background check in Fayette County and have someone from Fayette County that has access and ability to upload that for that person, and then it's there. So we'd cut out a lot of those background checks that have to be done multiple times, but also one application for the entire system. And once you fill that out, then it's up to a district to call and say, hey, look, I'd like to learn a little bit more. Let's do an interview or maybe some other information. But we would ask for some funding for that, of course, but that one system I think would be phenomenal. And then getting input like what you just said is how can we make that system better and more efficient for everyone across the board? So we've had probably 2 or 3 different meetings. As a matter of fact, I met with Senator Givens this morning and kind of dropped that into his ear a little bit to say, hey, as we move forward, this is something that we could possibly look into as a one system state of the Commonwealth. These are the applicants that we have, and push that out there. So again, there's some work on that already, especially early on in this commissioner's work. But there's been some things behind the scenes that have been talked about for a while. So
Right. Well, let's follow up on that before session.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so this obviously is a great first start just because of the conversation. And just so you all know, and Representative John, I'm glad you brought it up though, and just in asking, and is that the push was can we see more real-time data? Mm-hmm. But the things that you all are elevating are really important that we remember, and maybe, excuse me, not look at it monthly, but quarterly or something that we can consider. I think, Travis, you have a section to show. Is that right?
Yeah. And I'll be really quick, Amanda. I know we're running close on time. But so what you see here, kind of, I guess, an accumulation of the different metrics within KDE are whether or not students are matriculating. And this is kind of the post-secondary portion. And this is not very current data that we have on here right now, but this is really to be here as a placeholder where you can kind of see, using the different categories, different subpopulations like gender, race, ethnicity, age range, things of that nature. But what we're going to be replacing this with is our preliminary enrollment so that you will get a much more timely view of what post-secondary enrollment looks like. And the good thing about that is, so we collect that. It should be due by September 15th from the different post-secondary institutions. And then at that point, we'll start working with KY Stats to get this updated with preliminary enrollment. Again, the same caveats that Dee Dee had, that's not finalized enrollment numbers. It hasn't reached census date yet. But it should be really close and give you a good idea. And what we'll also do is show over time kind of how those numbers change looking at preliminary enrollment year over year. That way we're kind of comparing apples to apples. But kind of some of the breakouts that we collect from preliminary enrollment that will be on here is credential seeking, first time students, adult students, and then also dual credit and dual enrollment students, like from that post-secondary perspective. So, hopefully we'll be able to give more timely enrollment data to this group to be able to see, more quickly kind of what those trends look like and what those year over year changes look like. And as Dee Dee goes through here, she'll kind of show you some of the breakouts, and you'll probably have to select type as well, Dee Dee. That just means it doesn't have total. And you can select each individual one, and it'll show you over time, or it'll show you by institution and by sector, kind of what those breakouts look like. But once we'll leave this, but really focus on preliminary enrollment to where you can see those individual groups and what those look like over time. So hopefully that'll be helpful. And Alicia, if you want to talk about, maybe kind of what you're seeing from an enrollment perspective, I know we don't have the data yet, but if you would feel comfortable with that.
Sure. So I represent KCTCS. So one of the nice things is that we have all of our data together in one system. So we really do monitor it. We send out an email on a weekly basis about what is happening with our enrollment. So we're seeing some real significant gains for this upcoming fall, or it just started this week. We're seeing some real significant gains in both our credential seeking population, our dual credit population, and then also those students who are just taking a class or two or coming for a workforce. And we are seeing those gains right now across 15 of our 16 colleges. And the only one where we're not seeing the gain, it's because of what Dee Dee talked about earlier. It's the data entry and the timing of that. So last year, one of our registrars went on maternity leave. So it changed the timing of data entry. So that's one of the reasons why you really have to know what's going on underneath the data when you talk about it. So looking forward to really good progress this fall.
Yeah, and I think probably, even outside of kind of the deliverables that we can provide to add value, just pulling the data leads from the different agencies together, in one room to meet once a month has been very valuable, even like I said, outside of creating these products, having the conversation to see kind of where our research overlaps and, how we can provide, better accountability for students. And so Amanda, thank you for kind of, like I said, putting that group together, and it's been very, very valuable.
I want to add one thing, Travis and Alicia. we don't have all of our numbers in because we're just starting school, but we're looking, as you all know, Kentucky was in higher ed. We were, if not the first state, one of the first states to rebound from COVID in enrollment. And last year we set a few records actually, and we're happy about that. This year is looking good also. In some of our institutions like KSU, they're significantly up. Talked with Bob Jackson yesterday, and their freshman class is looking large. And so all of our, so we are, and my guess is that if dual credit aligns with all of these numbers, once again, we won't have any solid numbers for a while. If that's the case, I would argue that we're probably going to be up significantly again in dual credit.
Right. I'm going to hop in now and say thank you, Dr. Thompson, for kind of teeing up the next conversation, which is about dual credit. I do want to encourage you, if you have other thoughts or comments or suggestions about the data dashboard, to please pop those into the chat box, and we'll be sure to take all those into consideration. But big thank you to the data team, Matt and Beth, and all the people who are on the data team for working hard on this. It's prompted a lot of conversation already, which is exactly what we had hoped for. So please just drop additional comments or suggestions into the chat, and we'll gather all those and share those with the data team, and I'm sure they'll continue to give updates as we move forward. We're happy today for the dual credit conversation to continue. We're welcoming Dr. Chris Ledford and Adam Blevins, who are here with the CPE's Data and Advanced Analytics team. They completed an analysis of dual credit in Kentucky and have some data and some outcomes to share with us today. So, Chris, I'll turn things over to you if you all want to go ahead and jump right in.
Well, thanks so much, Robin. Can you hear me okay? Good deal. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris Ledford. I'm the Associate Director in the Data and Advanced Analytics Unit in CPE. I'm here with my friend and colleague, Adam Blevins, who I'll turn it over to here in a few minutes. But we're here today to provide some descriptive updates on dual credit participation and outcomes in the Commonwealth. As we get started, I want to thank my friends at KDE and KY Stats for the data that they contributed to this presentation and were so helpful in helping us put together. I also want to mention that while most of the stuff you'll see today is descriptive, we have a larger controlled inferential study around dual credit that will be coming out toward the end of this calendar year. So we look forward to putting that out there and talking more with you about our findings at that time. As we get started, it's important to set the context for why the data that you're about to see matter, our dual credit attainment goal. Dual credit offers early post-secondary opportunities that permit students to simultaneously earn high school and college credit. As you all know, we have a bold, aggressive vision that by 2030, 50% of our high school graduates will have successfully completed a dual credit course. Well, that all sounds great, but why? Why does that matter? Well, because research tells us that dual credit experience and completion increase the likelihood of matriculation to, success in college, as well as the completion of a post-secondary credential that's likely to set up a student for a higher return on investment to their education and ultimately increase socioeconomic mobility throughout their life. The more we do that, the more we facilitate that for our students, the better the Commonwealth as a whole will be. So we're going to take some time to dig deeper into those metrics, those success metrics, and just see how we are doing here in the Commonwealth. So to get us started, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Adam Blevins, and I'll be back in a little bit to talk some more about future research and directions. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you, Chris. And hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here to speak today. Can everyone hear me okay before I take off?
Loud and clear.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I'm happy to be here with you all. My name is Adam Blevins. I'm the Senior Associate with the Data and Advanced Analytics Unit here at CPE. And we're going to go through quite a bit of data today, descriptive data related to dual credit, enrollment participation, as well as the post-secondary outcomes associated with it. There will be a lot that we run through, but don't worry, because all of the information we're sharing today can also be shared in the form of a PowerPoint. We're always happy to engage in further discussion and things like that outside of this presentation as well. But with that being said, we will go ahead and jump in. So here we're going to start by looking at dual credit enrollment. Enrollment in dual credit courses has really been increasing over time by about 51% since academic year 2017 to 18. And that rate of increase has only gone up since, or post-pandemic, I should say. And when we turn and look instead of just at the raw enrollment numbers, we also look here at the actual number of credit hours earned through dual credit, and we again see some pretty substantial gains over that same period. About 57 percentage point increase between 2017 to 18 to 2022 to 23. And when we transition from looking at just those raw numbers, we bring here the proportion of Kentucky high school graduates who participated in dual credit. And we again see really substantial increases here, going up by about 19 percentage points since the graduating class of 2016 up to the graduating class of 2022. And, you know, again, we hope and anticipate that these figures will continue to increase just given the raw enrollment and credit hour completion numbers as well. And now for the big picture, here we're looking again at the proportion of Kentucky high school graduates who actually passed a dual credit course with a C or better. And we see, again, some fantastic growth over time, increasing by about 18 percentage points since the graduating class of 2016. Okay, so that was a really quick overview of kind of where we're at in terms of enrollment, participation in dual credit. We see some really stark and pronounced gains over time. But now we're going to spend a little bit more time looking at the post-secondary outcome side of this. So, you know, the numbers we see on the front end pre-matriculation look fantastic, but really the stuff on the back end when we start talking about student success is really what we're trying to get at here when we talk about dual credit and the benefits associated with dual credit, as Chris opened with previously. And so here we're looking at college going rates of Kentucky high school students. We again see a consistent, and I should announce before we take off, all of these subsequent graphs that I show you all, the blue will be those who attempted or participated in dual credit. The orange will be those who did not attempt or did not participate in any dual credit courses. But here we're looking at our college going rates of Kentucky high school students. We see a consistent gap between these two groups of about 40 percentage points over the last 2 years, which has widened considerably since our initial year in 2016. The disparity in college going rate here is also really consistent when we include subgroups. So you can think of under-resourced or underrepresented students, free or reduced lunch students, or low income, which really suggests that dual credit has the potential to help close some of those equity gaps, some of those gaps in college matriculation for our high school students looking to go into college. Transitioning now from matriculation into that first year GPA, we also see a gap in our first year GPA across these two groups of about 0.45, so half a GPA point here. So not only is this a big piece of the immediate conversation in terms of student success, of course, GPA is a huge indicator of student success, but that also has some larger implications when we consider things like things that are crucial to the student experience, such as potential funding opportunities later on, or internships, things like that, where GPA may play a role in whether or not a student can participate or obtain some additional funds to assist them as they continue through their post-secondary journey. And again, on that financial side, we also see a gap when we look at the level of unmet financial need between these two groups. And we see that dual credit students have about $1,400 less in unmet financial need compared to non-participants. And while there's quite a bit that goes into this descriptive data that we're showing here, what is also being captured again are some of those financial awards for which dual credit students are better positioned to obtain. And here we're now looking at our first semester hours attempted, and dual credit students dual credit participants again take higher course loads compared to non-participants by about 1.3 credit hours. So again, this is really suggesting that dual credit students are better prepared to enroll in higher course loads, which would thereby promote timely and efficient degree and credential completion, and also just promote the likelihood that they'll actually complete a degree or credential overall. Getting into our big outcome measures here, we're going to start with our retention rate. And we again see a considerable gap between dual credit and non-dual credit students when we look at first to second year retention. With dual credit participants really being retained at a rate about 11.8 percentage points higher than non-participants. So there's a really big drop off whenever we start looking at that, and it's held consistent. It's been consistent since we started tracking this here in this analysis. And again, that is suggesting the additional level of preparedness that dual credit students have once they enroll and continue to enroll in post-secondary courses. So now here's kind of the ultimate thing that we look at when we talk about student success, right? It's did you or did you not? Was a student able to complete a degree or a credential? Were they unable to do that? And ultimately, the disparities that we've been talking about between these two groups, so dual credit participants and non-participants, still show up here. Dual credit participants have a completion rate of about 22 percentage points higher than our non-participant group. Again, showing some of those long-term long-term impacts of preparedness for students who take dual credit compared to those who do not. And again, this was a lot of information that's kind of been wrapped up in this descriptive analysis, but the big key takeaway is that dual credit participation is associated with a broad array of these post-secondary success measures and outcomes, all the way from matriculation to completion. As a final note here as well, we'll continue to update this. We're really looking forward to continued work here as we work on our larger controlled study that Chris had mentioned previously, and as we continue to build out our descriptive analysis here when we continue to gather updated enrollment and completion figures and things like that. So with all that being said, I'll go ahead and pass it back to Chris to provide a little bit more on the disaggregation within these groups, and then to subsequently close our conversation today. So thank you all.
Well, thank you very much. I think, we can all agree here that dual credit is a really impactful way for students to get a strong start to the race, if you will. And we know that it helps students continue the race to that credential and ultimately complete that race. With that said, if something's important and it's working, we want to keep working together to find ways to improve it. So that's kind of where we've been focused. And I know some of these topics have been discussed before, but, we're thinking about these things in terms of data. One thing that stood out to us in our analysis was some disparities in dual credit participation by area development district. While dual credit participation has grown across the state, there are some pretty significant variations across the area development districts. On this chart, I don't want you to lose sight of the forest for the trees, except to note that in each one of those years, so each of those stacks of dots represents the area development district participation rates in dual credit in that year. Don't lose so much, for looking at those dots, but just notice how much variation there are among those dots around the state participation rate. On the next slide, what I do want to kind of convey is one thing that we noticed in each of those years is that some of our largest area development districts, for example, KIPTA, which is the Louisville area, the Bluegrass area, and then the Northern Kentucky area around Cincinnati, typically rank among the three lowest districts in terms of dual credit participation rates. I have not dug into those data with more kind of supporting qualitative evidence or some sort of institutional level details, but things that come to mind are the challenges of big cities and getting students to various locations if there are opportunities being offered at high schools, and so on. But all that to say, we notice a very stark divergence in participation rates between our very urban areas and our very rural areas. One thing that stuck out to me in this, of all of the students who graduated in 2021 who did not participate in any dual credit opportunity, 50% of them were enrolled in the in districts in the KIPTA region and the Bluegrass region, so areas around in and around Louisville and Lexington. So a lot of opportunity for growth there. Moving along, we also noticed that, there are still some, although all groups are rising over the time, and that is very much a credit to the work that goes on in this group and ultimately that dual credit attainment goal. There still are some gaps in and among under-resourced and underrepresented students compared to their counterparts. So looking at this chart, that gray line or let me start with the red line. That is all high school graduates and their dual credit participation rate in those years going across the bottom axis. So the two lines above the red line are paid lunch students, so the gray line there, and then the blue line is non-underrepresented minority students. And then kind of the opposite buckets of students to those groups are the lines below the red line. So the purple line is the free and reduced lunch student group, and then the green line is the underrepresented minority student group. So again, all students growing in terms of participation over time, but some gaps do still exist. Now, if you think back to the point that Adam made earlier in terms of the college going and some of the success metrics that he was talking about, when we break all of those charts out, those descriptors out by subgroup, the same effects hold, and they held in previous inferential studies that we did at the 4-year and 2-year levels in the past. That really sets the stage for why this chart and why these data matter. If dual credit can promote gap closing and ultimately success in the first year of post-secondary, then these closing the gaps here in terms of participation by getting more students into the race is all too critical and something we look forward to helping in the future with research. Finally, to wrap up, just some key takeaways. Again, dual credit participation is rising rapidly over time. The completion rate is rising rapidly over time. The implications of those experiences matter across the state, across subgroup, and across demographic groups. Again, some opportunities for improvement in terms of equitable outcomes across region and groups, and some stuff that we look forward to working closer on over time. Robin, back to you.
Thank you, Chris and Adam, for that summary. I do have one question in the chat from Penny that says, does this data include students with disabilities and those in alternative programs who are DJJ involved, that sort of thing? So I'll let you address that, Chris.
So our dual credit, when we're looking at dual credit outcomes for graduating classes, we're looking at outcomes for all of our public high school graduates, and those do include students who are enrolled at alternative high schools over time. We do have some data partitioned out over time. Perhaps this question originally came from you, but we did field a question not too long ago about alternative program participation, so we can provide some of the subgroup data back to you in an email or something if you want. But yes, yeah, they are in here.
I'm pretty sure that was me. My apologies, but it's too much to type. What I didn't ask about, well, you said all high school students, so I assume, could we disaggregate EL learners as well? In terms of when you talk about underrepresented and free and reduced lunch, I think part of the issue with urban areas is this is about access, right?
Yeah.
So when you talk about kids who look like me or kids who are free and reduced lunch, it's not because they don't want to, it's because they're not given the opportunity or given the access.
Sure.
So we need to figure out, when we look at this data, we need to be honest and understand that it's because they're not being told or being given the opportunity. And how do we address that early on?
Yeah, absolutely. And great context there. We do have some of those kind of alternative program data. I think that question may have come from you offline. We do have those data and have been working with our partners over at KY Stats to kind of summarize those. So I'm happy to connect with you on those offline. Great points there.
Penny, I want to point out your point is exactly right. We see this with AP and dual credit. The pipeline, that's the reason why our new dual credit policy focuses heavily on the pipeline. As Amanda can tell you, because that's exactly what we found out. Representative Tipton, I don't know how much of this that you got, but I mean, obviously dual credit is doing what we purported are the great things of dual credit, right? I mean, who would ever, and Kentucky is the first state to be able to really look at this data in an outcome manner. So I think it leads us to some good policy discussions, to be honest with you, Robbie. I mean, and by the way, it probably answered some of your questions around percentages earlier. We not only have increased it that level, we've also, though, can show outcomes that are extremely positive. The other item that's not on here is that our four-year institutions were back to a four-year degree. And my argument is dual credit helped that a lot, right? So affordability is another conversation we haven't even talked about out of this. So these data are showing that what we put in place years ago, Representative Tipton, is really working in the manner that we thought it would work. Now, the real issue is, not real issue, I think Penny points out one of the issues. I mean, we see with outcomes, they are closing gaps. Dual credit is having that effect, not just with people of color, but with a variety of our constituency that are needing that extra help. The other point, though, that should be pointed out toward our 50% attainment, we're the first state, I'll brag on Amanda and her group a little bit, first state to set an attainment goal around dual credit, and people around the country just find that really just wonderful, as a matter of fact. But it is exactly what it means. So I guess somewhere along the way, we have to understand our policies keeping up with our actions in this case versus actions keeping up with policy. Are there ways that we need to look at, Commissioner, what's happening in the junior and senior year? Is there ways that we need to look at what's happening, Jenny and others, in post-secondary and how we're conducting those? One of the items that we'll be looking at strongly this next year or so are quality indicators. You know, are we able to measure across all areas that the dual credit, I mean, it is a college course, right? I mean, are they been taught at that level, and are we getting the outcomes that are needed? But with these big macro outputs, and good job, Chris and Blake, when we look at these macro outputs, it is doing what it purported that we thought that it would do. So if there's a success story here that we can all celebrate, for those of us that have been around for a few years, I mean, I think this is one.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. We do have two questions, one from Jenny and then one from Robert Hayes. I'm assuming, Robert, you still have a question. So we'll start with Jenny and then we'll go to Robert.
So Chris, can I just ask you a question about your free and reduced lunch data? Where is that coming from?
Those are the KY Stats, the high school KDE KY Stats data. Dee Dee or Beth, if you all want to provide some content expertise on that.
Is that coming from like KIA, like people who are officially registered for free and reduced lunch? Or is that coming from, for instance, Jefferson County, every single student, we're a community school district. And so every single student is considered to be on free and reduced lunch, but only a percentage of those actually go through the process of being registered through KIA to be on free and reduced lunch. So I'm just interested in which piece, where you're getting that data from.
That data is coming probably from Kentucky Department of Education. If a student's in a CEC school, a community eligibility type of school, they're not all counted as free and reduced lunch. That is income dependent. There's some students that do default to that free and reduced free category if they're receiving, if they're direct certified. They're from the Cabinet for Health and Family Services. They might be on Medicaid. They might be receiving food stamps, things like that. They'll be directly certified. Others have to create a income eligibility form.
Right.
And so they complete the form, and that's how they are designated free and reduced lunch.
And is that looking at whether or not they were free and reduced lunch any year during their high school career, or is only whether or not they were free and reduced lunch for the year that they took dual credit? Is that any of the 4 years?
It would depend on how that data is being provided, and I'm not sure. What Kentucky does from a KDE standpoint, we provide the data to Kentucky Stats annually, and so we have an indicator for every year that would show whether they were free and reduced lunch each year. So they could be providing it based on that annualized data or high school data. Maybe Beth can speak to that. I can't.
Sure. So those individuals that Chris is talking about, those are cohorts of high school graduates. So when we talk about cohorts of high school graduates, we're talking about in their graduating year, were they eligible for free or reduced price lunch? I know this is different than what Kia does when we're talking about FRL status and we're looking at like Keys money or so forth, where I believe, and Kia folks can correct me, I believe it's at any point in your high school career, whereas when we're talking about it, it is just that 12th grade year.
Okay. I see Chris nodding his head. All right, I'm gonna toss the ball over now to Robert. I think you had a question.
Yeah, I will be very quick, and it could be that I was looking at the presentation incorrectly, but it looks like the overall completion percentage has increased across populations, but that the gap actually looks like it has increased from the higher income students versus lower income students at each end of the spectrum. So the free and reduced lunch, and this was just very quick and glancing, it looked like those folks were completing dual credit a little bit over 15% less than those who paid full lunch, but the last measure that had gotten around 21%. I was just curious, might there be a systemic rationale for that, or am I just, and it could be that I'm just looking at the chart wrong.
There are some differences that have grown over time. One thing I will say is that I think as we start collecting cohorts that some of the graduates at the tail end of our data set are folks who were starting right during the middle of the pandemic or starting to become eligible for dual credit participation right at the height of the pandemic. So I think we'll really start to see more gap closing as we start to get more graduating cohorts in our data. But back to your question, there are some gaps that, are a couple of percentage points one way or the other. Some have increased a little bit over time. Keep in mind that sort of that 2021 cohort really is kind of the last cohort before the formation of this group and all of the work that's kind of been going on in this. So I also think that we'll, for those reasons, we'll start to see some gap closing over time. And the final thing that I would say, kind of back to the idea about the nuances in those data or some systemic factors, I think some of those geographic divergent patterns and some of those things that we kind of talked about at the tail end are related to these. So some things that we'll want to pay attention to going forward.
Yeah, Robbie, and a big place where we're really seeing kind of gap closing is in the likelihood of kind of first year student success metrics. We saw that in our last inferential study, and hopefully we see that continue in our newer inferential study, but where we're looking at kind of the likelihood of a student earning an A or a B kind of in that first year. And we did see the effect of taking a dual credit course in our last study was increased more in kind of those more underserved groups than the total population. So we are seeing gap closing there, and hopefully we continue to see that.
And let me, not to talk too much statistics here, but part of what you're asking is a lagging indicator, right? Because what we found out, even when we changed the policy, is exactly what you're pointing out. And if you take into consideration that COVID happened in 20, before you had dual credit, a whole lot of people were taking it that were, in better conditions, if you will, when it comes to socioeconomic status and everything else. We noticed that. So we had a dearth of people that were in need, free and reduced lunch, people of color and other things taking it. But those we found in what I call to be an indicator like post-secondary success, even though the numbers were a lot less and the gaps were larger, when they did take it, they were having greater success. So that's why we changed our policy based on exactly your question, not the only question, but one of the main questions are, okay, if that's the case, if dual credit's that good, why are we leaving certain people out of the population group, right? And so that's what you've seen in the last couple of years. And it's going to take us a while to get to a point of really being able to see what you're considering to be the effect of graduation and that gap closing. But that's exactly right. So early success are showing all students, if they take it in their first year post-secondary, they're having greater success. And the students that are typically historically underserved are having even a better success, right? So, and a part of that could be around the idea that, hey, I can do this work. I've never been told that before. So that's an area that one of these days we need to explore in a qualitative study to find out exactly if they receive that value proposition and knowing that they can actually do the work. So there's a lot of what I call research questions circling around this early work. Once again, our team, KY Stats and others, KDE and CPE, we've been able to do some stuff with data that nobody else has been able to do. So these questions that we're asking are still forward-thinking questions that other states haven't gotten around to see the data to ask.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson, for those remarks. I'd like to wind up our conversation around dual credit for the sake of time. We want to get to our conversation with Dr. McLean, who's joined us to talk about AI. But before we do that, one of the ways that we're working on improvements to our dual credit system in Kentucky is through a dual credit community of practice. And back in June, we brought together dual credit stakeholders from all across the state to talk with that group and to synergize and try to figure out a path forward that would really help us. Alisher was there that day, and I asked him to share a few reflections about the work of that meeting and just some takeaways. So Alisher, we'll let you wind up our conversation around dual credit.
Thanks, Robin, and thanks to this team. My name is Alisher Barukanoff. I'm with the Kentucky Workforce Innovation Board. I'm the executive director, and I had the opportunity to come with our chairman representing Toyota. And so it's a business kind of mindset that he has, and he's also an engineer, so I get to work with an engineer mind along the way. So just kind of a couple takeaways wanted to share with you all. Obviously, it was great to hear that Kentucky is a national leader in this and to hear that we're striving to be the national leader in dual credit. So that was a great takeaway from that. Similar to the conversation we were just having and seeing the data, I think where our chairman was thinking is, what is the participation and variation across the board in Kentucky? Are some areas better served than others? And I think you all are addressing those points. And I think from the workforce perspective, we all are also interested, are the dual credit students involved in various work-based learning opportunities in those experiential learnings, or the 3 ships, as we call it, mentorships, apprenticeships, internships? Are they involved in that? And then from the workforce perspective, when you see a student engage in dual credit and they put that on the resume and they come to a job interview, I think that sets them apart from others, showing motivation and ability to take on the extra load to be able to potentially be a better worker. So those things do paint a picture of a typical profile of a working individual in Kentucky. So that was something that we took away from. And then I also wanted to mention the question that we had is, does dual credit lead to better wages at the end of it all? I know it leads to better opportunities to enter post-secondary education, and post-secondary education has better wages connected to it. But individuals that may not be going to post-secondary, do they have better wages coming out versus someone that does not do dual credit and go straight into the workforce? And then finally, I did want to mention to you all, we have a pretty good engaged business community at the Kentucky Workforce Innovation Board. We have even a larger community of committee work. And so if there's anything you all ever need from the business side to reflect on, to do focus group, we are open for that. We've done it with adult education. So we are available to kind of give a different perspective and engage our members to see what they can provide to increase the opportunities for students, to increase the opportunities for Kentuckians entering the workforce and finding success in our state. So hopefully I didn't take up too much time. Back to you all, and happy to attend and participate.
Thank you so much for sharing, Alisher. We do appreciate your thoughts and your participation that day. Amanda, I'll turn it to you now to introduce our guest on artificial.
Yes, so good afternoon, Dr. McLean. We are so glad to have you. And so we got a little bit of a later start, but we said this is just the beginning of the conversation to engage her with this. As I said earlier, we had questions about the impact of AI, and Dr. McLean comes with a wealth of experience and knowledge in computer science, starting her own business and really becoming quite the expert in AI and its impact on society and on our lives. And so when Robin and I talked to her to see if it would be a good fit for her to help us get this conversation started, we knew within a minute that she was the perfect person for us. So I will share her bio with you because I don't want to take up any more of her talk time. But Dr. McLean, we are so grateful to have you today. And I'm going to just turn it over to you to kind of get started and just talk a little bit about yourself and some of the questions that we sent to you to get this conversation rolling about AI.
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. Anytime you do a presentation, you're always kind of looking around for familiar faces, right? Hi, Alisher. It's good to see you. I haven't seen you in ages. And good afternoon to everybody who is here. Amanda, I have a presentation. Is that okay? I'm going to try and kind of move through it, but
yes,
okay,
I'll go ahead and able to share.
Okay, sounds good. I will find that screen. Oh, look at me looking up KY stats. That's what I was doing while you all are talking. A really fascinating conversation that was going on when I came in. It's really, really exciting here talking about statistics and students on free and reduced lunch and access. It's really, I'm really excited to be here. So let me just start by saying thank you for having me. We're going to talk a little bit about the integration of AI in education. And my name is Alicia McLean. I hold my PhD in educational leadership, evaluation, and organizational development. I started a nonprofit called Technique, which was based on the research around what attracts underrepresented groups to the field of computer science. And I also have a for-profit company called Vividus Labs. We support organizations and companies with data strategy, program evaluation, AI implementation, and tech support. So I want to tell you a little story. Once upon a time at a high-ranking school in Kentucky, I won't mention the school by name, but I was called in as an expert, kind of like this, to talk a little bit about AI. And when I came into the office, the principal, APs, everybody was there. I said, hi, tell me about AI and, tell me what you're looking for or what you're thinking about. And they were like, well, we're hoping that you can help us with catching the kids cheating with AI. And I said, ooh, that's just not, there are people and platforms and software that can sort of help you with that. None of them are accurate. And actually they have equity issues built in. But that's not quite what I do. That's not quite my approach. And they were kind of, like, well, that's really the priority. And so I said, well, let me just, tell you a little bit about AI. And this was back when ChatGPT and generative AI were just, there were things people have kind of heard about, some people resisting it, with good reason. And so I started saying, they were like, so what, what can it do for us? And I said, well, it can, at that time, like it can really like help you, any mundane task that you have, it can really like kind of support it, not just mundane, but complex, right? But one of the APs stopped and looked up and said, can it help me write recommendations for students? And I was like, oh my God, absolutely. And like the whole conversation changed. And the point of telling that story is that we're oftentimes, and I'm a former JCPS teacher, we are oftentimes so focused on what the potential for students learning and critical thinking to be if we integrate, this generative AI into curriculum, that we forget that it's here to make all of our lives easier. And it's funny because the whole tone of the conversation changed now that they understood how it could be a tool for them. And then it's like, oh, and then you get a little bit of a sense of guilt, like, oh man, should I be using this tool? How can I use it and then have the students not use it? So I'm just telling that to sort of frame our conversation today, and hopefully subsequent conversations, that I am not really like anti ChatGPT in the classroom. I'm not necessarily anti using it to write essays, because I think that I used to be a math teacher, high school math teacher. I taught at Shawnee High School, Moore High School, and Manual High School. It's like the introduction of the graphing calculator, right? We adjusted to it. We adjusted, pivoted on some of the requirements that we were looking for, and we had the same concerns. We had the same concerns around learning. Well, if they can't add, on their own, then like how will they be successful in life? So this is not new. It's something we've experienced before. It is new because it is massively, massively powerful. And everything that we do in the future, this is like being on the brink of the internet times 10. It's massive. And so that is why, for me, there are things that are going on that are much, much more important than whether or not you wrote your Walden essay with chat. And so I just want to caution that I'm not really the one if you're looking for, like all the reasons why we should keep generative AI out of the classroom. I was going to start with some ChatGPT fun and actually write a recommendation in iambic pentameter, because man, we all remember that Shakespeare moment, right? I always thought that the cadence of iambic pentameter was really, really interesting. So anyway, but for the sake of time, I'm going to move on. So first of all, what is AI? What is artificial intelligence? It basically, and I'm trying to, sorry, the thing is like in the way of my slides. I'm trying to move through this pretty quickly. And Amanda or Robin, if you see questions in the chat, please feel free to interrupt me. I'm over on my screen, so I can't quite see if people are asking questions.
Not a problem.
But really the best way to describe it is probably to use a classroom example. Basically, artificial intelligence is when machines try and mimic humans. We have the highest order of thinking basically on the planet. And so the highest order of thinking on a machine would be trying to mimic us. There's a couple of categories. There's supervised learning and unsupervised learning. If we thought about that in the classroom, supervised learning is when we're feeding the machine data. And it makes decisions or makes predictions or prescriptions based on that data. And unsupervised is sort of those, like you're exploring on your own, an exploratory analysis, if you will. I heard some statistics folks in here. And so it's kind of making decisions on its own. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the learning that takes place, and everybody here is what's so exciting. Everybody here is interested in learning. We're all here because we care about how humans learn, how children learn, how young people learn. All of it is trying to mimic a baby, and really a baby, and of course a full-grown human as well. But the way a baby learns is something that we're all very much familiar with. No one explicitly tells a baby, okay, here's how you walk, right? No one explicitly says, okay, pick this foot up, right? I'm looking down at my feet. Pick this foot up, move it forward. We don't ever actually say that, right? The baby watches. If it's meeting its milestones, right? I'm a mom too. I remember the milestones. Oh my gosh, she's taking 2 steps and not 3. Like it's all falling apart. And they watch and they learn, they try, and then they make mistakes, and then they try again, and eventually they learn in some ways almost through osmosis. But really the osmosis is really just that you keep trying, and it's from repetition and pattern recognition, and not from explicit instructions, which in computational language would be algorithms. And so that's kind of where it comes from. And I think the best way to maybe show its comparison on a human level. Okay. So there's a few different, this is sort of back when machine learning, it's really important to differentiate, I think, between what AI and machine learning used to be compared to what it is now. So we had those predictive and prescriptive analytics that it could do. And a great example of that is chess. When was it Watson, or was that on Jeopardy? I feel like that was on Jeopardy, but you know what I mean? Like the chess where the computer could actually beat the human in chess. That's using sort of predictive and prescriptive analytics, where it's saying that, that person moved there, therefore, we predict that next it'll move here, or probably even better to say is that person moved there, and so we should move here because we predict that it's going to move here next. With robotics and sensors, I think that sometimes we think like, oh, that's, like advanced manufacturing, things like that. But the Roomba, I remember buying a Roomba one time at Costco a few years ago, back before generative AI came out, and it could learn the landscape of my floor, right? And that was from repetition and bringing in information and then making decisions based on that information. Image recognition, we all have that. Probably somebody in here has a flip phone. I can sense it, but I'm just playing. If you have a phone that it recognizes your face, that's an example of image recognition and computer vision. And then also natural language processing in its previous form was sentiment analysis. So it could analyze whether or not whether or not the tone of the text is positive, negative, and then it could also autocorrect. Way before generative AI came out, we had autocorrect. We had when you would be typing something on your phone or on a computer. A phone is a computer. It could predict what maybe it thought you wanted to say. That's not really anything new, but the natural language processing has now increased to the point where it does something very, very different, which makes this generative AI very, very interesting. And that is that it can create. And before, you had AI and machine learning could classify things. It could identify things, it could predict things, but it was not creating things. And so that's the big difference between generative AI and why it's like, whoa, that's a huge, huge difference, because creation is really what makes us human. And so it really kind of goes into, sort of existential questions about then, if a machine can create, then what does it mean to be human? And we're not here today to go into that, but all of these interesting conversations come up with this new form of artificial intelligence called generative AI. Most people know it as ChatGPT. There are multiple forms of ChatGPT, or I'm sorry, there are multiple forms of generative AI. ChatGPT is one of them. And it's really important to note that we are at the beginning. We are at the beginning of this technology. This is not even artificial general intelligence. When you think about C-3PO or the Terminator, that's artificial general intelligence. ChatGPT, as powerful and as many waves that it's making, is only the beginning. And so it's just an incredible time, honestly, to be alive. It's an incredible time to be in education as well. And these are sort of the things that we have to wrestle with. So it can do language generation. It recognizes patterns. The text that it's generating in ChatGPT or generative AI is based on patterns from looking at massive amounts of data. It's not really making a decision. It's not really alive or sentient. It's more deciding based on what has historically been done. And if I say what has historically been done, hopefully there's alarm bells that are going off in our heads, because what has historically been done has been chock full of bias, chock full of inequity. And I can tell by listening to the first part of this conversation that everybody here is focused, hopefully everybody here is focused on closing some of those gaps that exist. We have to be careful, because while ChatGPT is very powerful, it is also, as I said, mimicking humans and using historical data to make decisions for us. And so if we're using historical data that is full of bias and inequity, then it's going to continue to replicate that bias and inequity. So the difference is that we've got supervised learning, which is machine learning, and then generative AI is actually using unsupervised learning. So it's creating new data rather than just using existing data to make predictions. And machine learning can classify, whereas generative AI can create. So I just wanted to ask a quick question. If you can put, the little icon up in the chat, on your screen, raise the hand raise. Who's using some sort of generative AI daily? I see Eddie. Thanks, Eddie. See Amanda. Okay, good. It's giving me like how many are raising their hands. Great. Okay. Okay, probably a good amount of us, which is interesting. This is another thing we have to think about, right? Have those hard questions about, and that is, we are in industry. Whoops, sorry. We are in industry and we're using it. For myself and my companies, don't send me something. I'm talking about the people I work with. It's required to use generative AI. And I don't mean for like little things. I'm not saying every time you send me a text, you have to run it through, Gemini or whatever. I'm just saying that it is there to enhance your potential. And it saves time. And it's the future. Another thing is, like, I also use it so that I can keep an eye on it. Sometimes I have conversations with it to see how it's doing with bias. Like, I'll ask it some questions like, why is your team not diverse at OpenAI? And they're like, well, this is me talking to chat, but that's just me being a nerd. It's kind of me being a nerd, but it's also important because we need to use it in order to understand where its pitfalls are. So in the classroom, there's really a lot of use cases for it, a lot of them, as I'm sure you can imagine, and probably know. And ultimately the question we're trying to ask is, how do we harness AI for student success? Heard a lot of conversations about that. The following slides are just going to be a bunch of examples of how it can be done. You can align it with curricular objectives. You can scaffold learning. I can also send this slide deck. We really need it in professional development for educators. AI is one of those rare technologies that impacts every content area. Every field that our students go into is going to be affected by AI. That means we have to be in a place as teachers, as administrators, as legislators, where we provide a supportive environment where we can mentor and nurture them to use this in ethical ways. If we act like it doesn't exist or try and cut them off from using it, there's no way around them not using it. There's no way around them using it. And so what's going to happen is they're going to use it outside of a protected environment like the classroom. And the classroom can facilitate such incredible discussions around what is its ethical use? What is the ethical use? Should we use it for this essay? You can have really incredible discussions with young people around the use of this technology. But if we just sort of cut it out completely, act like it doesn't exist, and tell them you better not use chat to write this, they're going to use it. And that's based on my own research. They are going to use it. They're just not going to say that they're using it. And then we miss out on that opportunity to supervise it. We also, I'm sorry, I've just got this bar that's right in the middle. Okay. We also, in preparing teachers, we really need to prepare our teachers for AI integration. A lot of teachers are scared, are afraid. What does it mean? I've been teaching this class this way for the past 15 years. The only thing I know to immediately do is to say, don't use it to cheat, but how do I actually integrate it into my curriculum and use it as a learning tool? And actually taught a group of professors. It was a program that was stipend attached at a college. And the task was they had to integrate it into their lesson plan in some way. And somebody said, I actually don't think that AI is a good thing. And so I'm hesitant to put it into my lesson plan. I said, that's exactly what you should put in your lesson plan. That's exactly what should be in there. Let's have a debate. Is this a good thing? In what circumstances does this make sense to deploy? And in what circumstances does it not make sense? And the young people have a lot to say about that. In general, we need to promote AI literacy. A lot of the hesitance, which is typical, is based on a lack of information, a lack of understanding, a lack of knowledge about this technology. And if we can fill that gap with the teachers, then they're more empowered to be able to fill that gap with the students. So this is, in general, in a teacher roles and responsibilities. Typically, it's about 50 direct instruction, 20, 15, 15. You can see what's here. So 20% of our time as teachers is spent on student feedback and grading. And here's an example of how AI can mitigate that. Sorry, I've got this thing. Per assignment, 20 minutes per assignment. Think about all the assignments that teachers give per assignment based on whether it's short answer, essay, multiple choice. You can save a teachers a lot of time. Time is money. And so if this tool can effectively be used to save them time, then that gives them more opportunities and more free time to really perhaps build it into their curriculum, build it into their projects, I'm a big fan of project-based learning. These are all things where you're freed up to have the creative mind that you can spend on other things that you really want to spend on. It can help with student engagement. It can provide adaptive learning, and there are platforms out there that do that. I'm not really going to promote any of them because they really kind of need a deep dive to really understand what's out there that's being offered. It can help gamify lessons and enhance student engagement in that way. It can analyze their emotions and understand how they're reacting to things. How students are reacting to things and then pivot based on that reaction. It can basically do a lot of things. And one of the things that it can actually, if deployed correctly, it can be an equity tool. It can be, if I bring in my own identity and culture and community, and I'm able to bring that into my assignment, and this tool is able to recognize things that matter to me, then I'm more likely, multiple studies have shown that I'm more likely to find myself in the learning, right? It can also eliminate bias in grading essays. So think about the AP testing. As humans, typically we bring a certain amount of bias to when we're grading sort of open-ended things like essays. And this, if deployed correctly, and I'm going to keep saying this, can actually help to mitigate that bias. It can, in assessment and feedback, can give tons of insights, personalized feedback. And as I said, it can reduce bias in evaluation as well. It can also be a tool for collaboration and communication, but then of course there's challenges with that. We do have data privacy laws, which most definitely need to be honored. And so there's, I guess what I'm saying is there's a lot to wrestle with this technology. There's a lot of challenges in its deployment, but it's something we definitely have to consider moving forward. I heard folks talking about, I know KY Stats has a tremendous amount of data, which is incredible. It can be used for predictive analytics. It's more machine learning, but it can really be, when deployed, it can actually move learning forward and move progress forward. I'm skipping through this. There's data-driven insights that you can pull from its deployment in real time and provide personalized learning pathways, all the things that we sort of wish we could do, but don't have the human power to do it. AI can step in, if deployed correctly, and really supplement and augment what's already being done to move student learning forward. So it can do all of these things. This is sort of the present and future of AI in education. These are all the things that it can do now. I would say most educational systems are not using them. So that's why I put present and future, that this is what really we need to consider as we move into the future and think about ways that we can deploy this technology. From a future of education standpoint, and you can kind of read this taxonomy like up or down, but the biggest thing is we need to understand and anticipate the long-term implications of AI on teaching and learning. That's probably where you should start, but it also could be where you end. In fact, this should be of cyclical nature. It should be iterative. Our approach to this should be iterative, where we're constantly anticipating the implications of AI, not just on teaching and learning, but also on industry, and making sure that we're preparing our students for industry, and not just for industry, but also its societal, ethical implications, legal. There's something for everybody in this technology. Speaking of ethics, the ethical challenges posed by AI in education are not just technical, but deeply social and political, requiring careful consideration of the values and principles that should guide the development and deployment of these technologies. This statement right here makes the case for why it should be considered in all content areas. The ethical challenges posed in places in fields like healthcare, in engineering, and think about autonomous cars, mechanical engineering, computer engineering, but not just the liberal arts, in teaching and education and everything in legislation, need to be wrestled with. And we need to be there with the students, wrestling with those ethical implications, because all of society will be affected by this technology. And so I just wanted to stop there and say, let's chat. What questions do you have for me, or what can we discuss at this point with a whole 3 minutes left? Anybody?
Alicia, I don't have a question. I have a comment. First of all, I love this presentation, and you're exactly right. Our conversation in post-secondary now is how, and I've got a team to start working on this, is how do we incorporate this in a positive, proactive way? We can't run away from it. And we see, I mean, yes, you can make laws around ethics. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, should be. But how do we, this learning tool is here. And it kind of reminds me of the days when we argued against having fax machines. We have to figure out how to incorporate this, and we're behind a little bit, no doubt, even in post-secondary. So for me, it is about how then do we create some process, if you want to call it that. We can put together a consortium, we can put together a study group, all that. That's important. But I think we're really going to have to rethink how we do pedagogy, rethink how we do teacher education, rethink how we do professional development, rethink how we do all of that. AI can be a partner in that, but also can be really a learning tool as a way of performing that education. So thank you very much for your presentation.
Absolutely. And I hear what you're saying, Aaron, that it's not going anywhere. How can we harness it? One great thing about it is that it can actually make teachers' lives easier. And we typically like signing on to things when they're going to make our lives easier. And so that makes it a little, a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. It makes it a little easier if it's like, oh, and then in the process, it'll save me time so that I can concentrate on why I decided to become a teacher in the first place. I'm in. Oh, I don't have to write these recommendations, so I can focus on why I became an administrator in the first place. I'm in, so it's really a unique technology, and it's a unique time. Thank you.
Yeah, and Dr. McLean, you actually, Robin Kinney also put a question is like, how do we embrace and grow with it? And I think you kind of alluded to some of that too, of just, and Dr. Thompson did as well, of just moving forward with it, because it's not going away, right? So how do we embrace it?
I think there are tangible ways that we can incorporate policy, incorporate procedures where teachers are trained on this technology. Teachers are required as part of their training that they have lesson plans that incorporate this technology, that they see the value of it. If we sort of leave it to, just kind of being open and like, we'll use it when it makes sense for you, we probably won't get as much value from it as we would if we intentionally moved with forming committees and saying like, let's create, systems and processes that are going to help to move this forward.
That's right. Representative Tipton, you had a question.
Thank you, Ellis. Dr. McLean, thank you for being here today. I've taken every opportunity to participate in the AI forum I could this summer because it's here, it's not going away, and we've got to figure out what to do about it. And I'm convinced we're behind and we're probably not going to catch up. But I think we need to put appropriate guardrails in place. And as a policymaker, I'm very interested in that. I appreciate what you said. It's imperative that our teacher prep institutions are doing a better job of preparing the teachers who are coming out of their programs, because they may have students in their classroom and know more about AI than they do.
Mhm.
And also on professional development. I'm very much aware of the work that SREB is doing, and they're putting out sets of policies from other states, or it's a good resource to get good policy recommendations about how to, from a state perspective, how we should approach the use of AI in education.
That is a good question. And Tipton, what a great name. That's your first name?
That's my last name, James Tipton.
Oh, okay. I'll call you Tipton. Tipton, we're not as behind as you think we are. This is a new technology that a lot of organizations don't know what to do with. And I'm answering your question by saying that we're not actually behind. There's not necessarily like states who have adopted incredible legislature around education that has no everybody, because it's pushing at our principles of teaching and learning, right? And so education systems to me are like the Titanic. Like, it's very difficult. It's very slow to turn them. So if they're making progress, if other states are making progress, then it's still very slow unless they're very small, because something like this is going to take a lot of intentionality. It's going to take a long time. You're talking about change management, right? You're talking about changing hearts and minds and thinking in ways that we don't typically think about, from a technology that just bam came out of nowhere and all of a sudden it's kind of taken over everything. I would say give ourselves some grace. There's still time. This is a very forward thinking coalition that's here right now. The fact that you have me here and are interested in learning more about AI and how it works is a testament to the potential for the state of Kentucky to adopt things that can move this forward. I unfortunately don't have any examples for you right now, Tipton. I could probably look into it, but I don't know that there's any states that are really like way ahead on this, because it requires a massive shift in thinking, and that's not easy to do, and it takes a lot of time.
So there's others. I think this is just the beginning, and I know we're a little bit past time. And Dr. McLean, thank you for the extra time. This has really piqued a lot of interest, and we have even a couple comments in the chat that I will make sure you get, and a comment from Commissioner Fletcher, and then Eddie had questions around the use and the power for enhancing teaching and learning. So this is just the first conversation, and we would love to have you back and narrow in on some of these real pointed pieces, and maybe some examples and non-examples even. You know, we want to avoid, we don't want to make the same mistakes maybe as others, or go a different path, or think differently. So we will definitely follow up with you all. Your questioning today and the engagement was fantastic. We will follow up with the PowerPoints. And another one that Diane posted too. So I'm going to keep recording those. We have a lot to talk about with this. But we will follow up with the PowerPoints. Our next meeting is in November. It's November 13th, and it is face to face. And we will hopefully get a little bit longer on the calendar to dig into some of these topics. But we will be in touch with everyone, and I will make sure, Dr. McLean, that you get the questions as well. And if you can send us your PowerPoint, we will absolutely get these out to people. I'm sure more questions will surface. But thank you, everyone, for your time, and we will see you in November.
Thank you. Yes, everything in the chat is amazing. Sorry, I know everybody's going.
They're the best group ever. I'm telling you.
This is the right group. This is the right group.
Yes, I will send you these questions if you'll send me your PowerPoint, and we will get that out to the whole group. So
sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.